Okay, so the next one up is number 9, and that is CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder. If we take most of the symptoms that I've talked about in the series so far, any and all of them can combine to form complex PTSD. Complex refers to the fact that this type of trauma often involves multiple types of abuse over time. People who have it tend to show very similar symptoms to those seen in classic PTSD. So things like flashbacks, nightmares, hypervigilance, feeling like constantly on guard, disassociation, which is feeling very distant and separate from outside of yourself, outside of your body, avoidance behaviors, and that means avoiding any kind of trigger situations where possible. So people who suffer from these symptoms tend to have 3 categories. So they can re-experience the event through flashbacks and nightmares, or they avoid the situations that trigger the memories of the event, or they just are constantly feeling hyper vigilant and on the alert for threats in their environment. So the symptoms can range from mild to severe depending on how much trauma you've experienced and how long since it occurred and how you processed it. And a lot of other factors come into play. You know, we're all different. It's often the case that when you relive the trauma, it's as if it's happening all over again. So the time distance of how long ago it happened is not always an indicator of how intense an episode might be, because it could have happened 20 years ago, but when you get triggered and the memory comes up, it could be as if it's actually happening all over again. You're back in that moment. And so it can be very, very distressing. So sustained abuse over time absolutely leads to CPTSD, and other examples of things that you might feel on an emotional level and that are very common is you might have angry outbursts when you're away from your abuser. You might have inability to control your emotions. You might find yourself just crying unexpectedly or a lot. Being easily startled, as I mentioned, that's connected with the hypervigilance. Also constant negative, fearful thoughts, inability to trust anyone, insomnia and nightmares that we've already talked about, reliving the trauma, again, the flashbacks, experiencing physical symptoms like the ones you'd get with anxiety or panic attacks, inability to speak or function. You can literally shut down when these things get so bad that you just can't deal with it anymore. And coming out of all of that, you might have this persistent desire to go back to your abuser if you've left them. And that, of course, brings us into trauma bonding territory, which is something I talk about in a different video. All of this is awful. You know, any one of those symptoms needs to be treated individually to help you let go of it and start to recover. Because if you don't treat these symptoms, extreme cases of CPTSD can result in suicide. We've touched on that briefly in another video. Self-harming or self-medicating with drugs or alcohol to cope, which often leads to further problems with addiction. And I will be talking about that soon as well. So if you're experiencing an awful lot of this and it's wrapped up in the PTS bundle, then please find a way to get help. Talk to your doctor, find a therapist, get a support group, get involved with people who understand what you're going through and can help you, because your long-term health and happiness depends on you getting help and getting healed, okay? So I hope that that's been helpful. So I will see you very soon. Bye for now.